Good morning to all of you. I'm happy to talk to you again today about Kant and the excerpt we have from the famous critique of judgment. We moved from Hume to Kant, and hopefully between today and next time we finish Kant and can go to Dickey. We are, of course, in the philosophy of art section. We talked last time, of course, about the beginning of this analytic of the beautiful, the first moment, the judgment of taste according to quality, and we determined first that it is an aesthetic judgment. So the judgment of taste is a question of the sensory world and the beautiful present in it, so it's a judgment of the beautiful. And we determined another thing about it. So first it is aesthetical, if you like, and secondly it is disinterested. So we don't have an interest in the thing's existence, and it is subjective, without an interest in the thing's existence at the same time. And we determined then this time, after these positive determinations, negatively, in other words, what it is not. And we said that the satisfaction of the pleasant is bound up with interest, and so any judgment on that cannot be judgment on the work of art, on the beautiful, if you like. Now we will move on to the satisfaction in the good, and again still determine negatively, in other words, saying what the aesthetical judgment, what the judgment of taste is not. So the judgment of taste is not a judgment on the good, for the simple reason, as Kant will show us, that the satisfaction of the good is bound up with interest, so it is not then disinterested. Let's start reading, and I believe here almost everything at first, and then we'll skip. Okay. Whatever by means of reason pleases through the concept, through the mere concept, is good. That which pleases only as a means we call good for something, the useful, but that which pleases for itself is the good in itself. In both there is always involved the concept of a purpose, and consequently the relation of reason to the at least possible volition or will, and thus a satisfaction in the presence of an object or an action, that is to say, id est, i.e. some kind of interest. Okay, very clear. So, first of all, we define what is good. Kant tells us whatever by means of reason pleases through the mere concept is good. Okay? So it means we have a certain pleasure that comes through the satisfaction by means of reason. So it means, of course, that reason can lead to pleasure. And however, this representation from reason, if you like, this thing that is coming from reason and that gives pleasure, that pleases, it is, of course, because we are in reason, a concept. So it's something that pleases us only through the concept, not through something we touch, something we eat, something we drink, of course, but the very concept, because we are in the realm of reason and not of the senses, right? So anything that pleases and pleases through its mere concept, and not because we're touching anything with our senses, everything that pleases by means of reason through the mere concept is good. We have a definition of good in Kant. Now there are two types, he tells us. That which pleases only as a means, so we have means and ends, right? Something that pleases us as a means we call good for something. When we represent it as a concept, it's good for something, so it's useful. What can be used for something. But that which pleases for itself, of course, and not because we are using it to reach something else, is the good in itself. In both, there is always involved the concept, of course, of a purpose, because you want to reach the thing for the thing in itself. You want what is good in itself. You want to get to it. Okay, so there is a purpose. There is a telos in Greek, if you like. There is a target to get to that thing, and of course, the one by means of which we get to something, there is also involved a purpose. I'm using it to get to something. And consequently, Kant says the relation of reason to the at least possible will. Okay, so then there is involved a purpose, and of course then a relation between reason and will, because in order to reach something, I have to go and act in the world to reach it. So there is a notion of will, and thus a satisfaction in the presence of an object or an action that is some kind of interest. Okay. So you may ask me, whatever by means of reason pleases through the mere concept is good. We have to be careful. A concept in reason, we can have many types of concepts. We can have a concept that can never have an exact object that represents it, and we can have a concept that does. For example, if I want a thing, a statue, okay? If I want, I don't know, a car, all right? So it's by having the concept of car, which is not physical itself, I'm already, it is something that pleases me, and so I want to reach for that car. I want to go build it or buy it, etc. So reason is going to influence my will to act, and then when I obtain, I have a presence of this object or this action, then I have an interest. Okay, so of course there is an interest in the coming of the object or the doing of an action. For example, if I want to do an action that leads to freedom, I can say I will build this associations building for people to help the handicapped and give them more freedom. This is an action. So again, there is an interest. I continue here with him. In order to find, Kant says, anything good, I must always know what sort of thing the object ought to be, should be, i.e., that is to say, I must have a concept of it, okay? But there is no need of this to find a thing beautiful, okay? This is a true distinction. So if I want to find something good, I must always represent it conceptually. So what is the best house for me? The best house is a house with perhaps a fireplace, a garage to put my car in, etc., etc., etc. I must have then a certain concept of it. But in the case of the beautiful, I'm not following, he's saying, a concept. In the case, in other words, of the judgment, the aesthetical judgment. So he says flowers, free delineations, outlines intertwined with one another without design and called conventional foliage have no meaning, depend on no definite concept, and yet they please. The satisfaction in the beautiful must depend on the reflection upon an object, leading to any concept, however indefinite. And it is thus distinguished from the pleasant, which rests entirely upon sensation. Okay. If I want certain satisfaction in finding something beautiful, okay, I must reflect on an object. So I don't want to make the object, right? I reflect on something that is already there. And this leads me, it doesn't matter to what, to any concept, however indefinite. I don't have a definite concept like I would have when I'm going to build a house. And so the satisfaction of the beautiful is then different from the satisfaction of the pleasant, which of course requires sensation and the actual presence also of a specific object in front of me. We will see in the next heading how the different three types of satisfactions are going to be presented again by Kant. Now, distinction again here between pleasant and good. Kant says, it is true, the pleasant seems in many cases to be the same as the good. Thus, people are accustomed to say that all gratification, especially if it lasts, is good in itself, which is very much the same as to say that lasting pleasure and the good are the same. But we can soon see that this is merely a confusion of words. For the concepts which properly belong to these expressions can in no way be interchanged. The pleasant, which as such represents the object simply in relation to sense, sensation, must first be brought by the concept of a purpose under principles of reason in order to call it good, as an object of the will. But there is involved a quite different relation to satisfaction in calling that which gratifies at the same time good may be seen from the fact that in the case of the good, the question always is whether it is mediately or immediately good, useful or good in itself. But on the contrary, in the case of the pleasant, there can be no question about this at all, for the word always signifies something which pleases immediately. The same is applicable to what I call beautiful. So, pardon me. This is a distinction between what pleases and what is the good, the pleasant and the good. That is interesting. You don't have to know it so very well, but let's just say that in what pleases, there is something immediate. I taste some chocolate and it pleases me. It is not exactly the same as representing to myself a concept of chocolate and then going to make chocolate or have a chocolate present in front of me and then tasting it and saying this is good for my taste, or if it is good for something else, right? The good, because there is such representation of a concept, because it can be useful in itself or useful to get to something else, perhaps in the case of chocolate to get to health, or because it has magnesium. But when it's a question of the pleasant, this is always an immediate pleasure that you feel. Okay? I think this is very clear. I think the example he gives afterwards is simple enough, and perhaps we need not get into it. We'll read just the last paragraph under this heading on page 210, right? So under the heading 4, the satisfaction in the good is bound up with interest. However, notwithstanding all this difference between the pleasant and the good, they both agree, the pleasant and the good, so they represent the concept of something that satisfies by means of which we reach a purpose, or that is a purpose in itself, the good, of course, and the pleasant, which pleases with regards to the senses, in reference to the senses, right? Pleasant and good, okay? However, notwithstanding all this difference between the pleasant and the good, they both agree in that they are always bound up with an interest in their object. There is always going to be an interest in the object. So either I consider this purpose, the object that I'm going to reach, the perfect house, the best house, etc. There is an object in mind, or I see immediately in front of me a house and it gives me this feeling of pleasure, or I touch something that's soft, that gives me pleasure, or I eat something that gives me pleasure. Every time there is an interest in the object. I continue. So are not only the pleasant and the immediate good, the useful, which is pleasing as a means towards pleasantness somewhere, but also that which is good absolutely and in every aspect. That is to say, moral good, which brings with it, moral good, which brings with it the highest interest. For the good is the object of will, i.e. our faculty of desire determined by reason, but to wish for something and to have a satisfaction in its existence, that is to say, to take an interest in it, are identical. Alright, so there is all of this, if I can summarize it, of course, every time that there is a question of pleasure or the pleasant, what pleases, or the question of the good, there is an interest in the object. And so, since we determined that the aesthetical judgment is disinterested, A judgment of the good and the judgment of the pleasant are not aesthetical judgments of the beautiful. We move on then, I think with this we end today, or maybe move on a bit more, we'll see. Comparison of the three specifically different kinds of satisfaction. Kant, now that he exposed them, and in order to make things even clearer, he will compare the three types of satisfaction. That is, of course, as you know, from the pleasant, the beautiful, and the good. Little bit of water first. Let's start. Page 210. Section 5, comparison of the three specifically different kinds of satisfaction. The pleasant one and the good second have both a reference to the faculty of desire. So it's a question of will, right? We desire something, we want to get to it. So we want it. Desire is always a question of will. So the pleasant and the good have both a reference to the faculty of desire. And they bring with them, the former, the pleasant, a satisfaction pathologically conditioned, but it means by impulses, stimuli, pathologically. Pathos, it means what you feel with your senses. Don't think that it means you're sick, pathologically. It means reception, reception from the senses. So the pleasant brings with it, has a reference to the faculty of desire, and brings with it, it brings with it a satisfaction that is pathologically conditioned, so by our impulses, since we are bodies, we are empirical beings with senses. And the latter, so the good, a pure practical satisfaction. Please note the word practical. It means of action. It comes from the Greek praxis. So action, and since I act in the world, my action involves the world, so it involves the things in the world and the others in the world. So this is morals. There's always a connection somehow, but not always, to morals. There could be. Okay, so practical, it means there is action involved. So the latter then, the good, a pure practical satisfaction, which is determined not merely by the representation of the object, but also by the represented connection of the subject with the existence of the object, right? Even if I think of the concept of house, I want me as a subject, that house, to exist. So, again, it is not merely the object that pleases, but also its existence. The fact that I want not just there to be a house, but I want the house, the concept of house, to come into the production, to be produced in existence. On the other hand, the judgment of taste, and this is the difference here, is neither one that is pathologically conditioned, that comes from our impulses, nor from a practical satisfaction. We don't want action, not from an action to make the object exist. The judgment of taste is merely not that of action, the opposite, in fact, contemplative, contemplation. Contemplative. That is to say, it is a judgment which, indifferent, as you know, as regards the existence of an object, compares its character with the feeling of pleasure and pain. But this contemplation itself is not directed to concepts, for the judgment of taste is not a cognitive judgment, either theoretical or practical, and thus it is not based on concept, or has its concepts and its purpose, nor has it concepts as its purpose. Okay. So we have more determination here of the kind of judgment that the judgment of taste is. It is contemplative. When we say contemplative, of course, that means first that we don't work to get something. It's not about the existence of something. It is not with regards to an interest in the existence or non-existence of something. But when we see a work, we feel pleasure or pain for it. We compare its character with the feeling of pleasure and pain. Now, this contemplation is neither then with interest in the existence of the object, nor is it directed to concepts. Why? Because why do we need concepts? In Kant, it's very important to know this. To think, and we know you think with concepts, to think is to judge. There's always judgments. Okay? Now, to think of something is to know something, to know the existence of something. So we need concepts if we want to know things, if we want knowledge. But we know from Kant now that this judgment, the judgment of taste, is not a judgment of knowledge. It's not a judgment that is called cognitive then. It is not a cognitive judgment, so it doesn't have to do with concepts, hence its difficulty. It has to do, as you see, with a certain feeling, with a feeling of pleasure and pain. It has, at least we compare its character with the feeling of pleasure and pain. It is contemplation. There is a contemplation of what's before us, but without an interest in the existence or non-existence of the object. And it is not a question of knowledge. If I have a painting, of course, in front of me, I can know that this is a painting. But when I say, because I have concepts that allow me to determine that this is a painting, to understand that this is a painting, I know that this is an object and this object is a painting. But this is not yet a judgment of taste for Kant, because this is a judgment just of knowledge. I know that this is a painting. In order to have a judgment of taste, I have to have disinterestedness and also something not connected to knowledge, not a question of knowing whether this is a painting or not a painting, but something that has to do with the feeling, contemplation that has to do with the production of a feeling within me of pleasure and pain towards something. Okay? We're moving, we can see very clearly here to a good determination of the judgment of taste. So let's continue. Kant always, in a way, repeats, makes things much clearer slowly. Always remember that as you read him, at first some things don't seem clear, and little by little, because he repeats in different ways and he organizes his thoughts, and everything depends on what's before and is taken over, we understand in the end. So don't worry. The pleasant, the beautiful, and the good. 1, 2, 3, right? Designate then 3 different relations of representations to the feeling of pleasure and pain, in reference to which we distinguish from each other objects or methods of representing them, and the expressions corresponding to each by which we mark our complacency in them are not the same. That which gratifies a man is called pleasant. Okay? So you feel some kind of physical satisfaction. That which gratifies a man is called pleasant. That which merely pleases him is beautiful. That which is esteemed or approved by him, that is to say, that to which he accords an objective worth, is good. Pleasantness concerns irrational animals also, but beauty only concerns men. That is to say, animal but still rational beings. Not merely as rational, qua rational, spirits, that is to say spirits, but qua animal also. And the good concerns every rational being in general. This is a proposition which can only be completely established and explained in the sequel. We may say that of all these 3 kinds of satisfaction, that of taste in the beautiful is alone a disinterested and free satisfaction. For no interest either of sense or of reason here forces our assent. Hence, we may say of satisfaction that it is related to the 3 aforesaid cases, in the 3 aforesaid that we gave, aforesaid cases, to inclination, to favor, or to respect. Now, favor is the only free satisfaction, an object of inclination and one that is proposed to our desire by a law of reason, leave us no freedom in forming for ourselves anywhere an object of pleasure. All interest presupposes or generates a want, and as the determining ground of assent, it leaves the judgment about the object no longer free. Okay. Now, The pleasant then is what gratifies us. It what gives us a certain, in fact, physical satisfaction because of senses involved with an object that exists. That which merely pleases is the beautiful. So when we have just pleasure from seeing something, not because it exists, but through our contemplation and without any interest in it, this is what we call the judgment of the beautiful. Please, in all this, don't confuse pleasant and pleasure. In what is pleasant, we have a interest from our senses, right? We are interested in the existence of something physically, empirically, and that we feel it from our senses, and it gives us that pleasant feeling, right? This is like eating a chocolate, like walking in the forest. Forest is of course an object also, like I don't know, watching a movie that you like, etc., etc. This is the pleasant. Now, that which merely pleases is beautiful without interest in the actual existence of the subject. So merely, only, and nothing else, right? That's why he's using merely. And of course, something that we esteem, something that we approve. We have, of course, a kind of moral dimension also sometimes here, but not always, is good. And we say it is good if this would exist. It is good if people would be free, so I make institutions to do it, I act. But it can also be good for something or good in itself. So it is good as a means, for example, to freedom to make associations, etc., action. So, other animals can find something pleasant. You can have a cat that likes catnip or likes milk. But when we are making a judgment of taste, so on the beautiful, the beauty only concerns men. So men are, of course, as it concerns them as animal and as rational. Why? Because we have to have a feeling of pleasure, and this only we get because we have a body that feels. So we are animal, but we are also rational beings. So we can also have, because not only the pleasure and pain, the something that gives us pleasure and pain, but also we can contemplate and we can then think, if you like, outside of mere pleasantness. So we have to have rationality, and we have to have our animal side in order to make a judgment of taste on the beautiful. Okay. All right, and of course the good concerns every rational being in general. Again, everyone that has reason can think of different concepts and want them to be realized. They constitute purposes for that person. The objects are purposes to reach. So, of course, the taste in the beautiful, once again, is the only one that is disinterested and free satisfaction. I'm satisfied with a work of art, not because it will bring me money or I have another interest in it. No, this is a totally free satisfaction, in the sense that there is no object and interest I want from it. Okay, this is the only one that is disinterested. Okay, now he brings these things that you don't absolutely need to know. Hence, we may say of satisfaction, it is related in the three aforesaid cases to inclination. Inclination, of course, this is something that inclines your desire one way or another, so it's highly connected also to the pleasant. To respect, this is of course highly connected to the good, because I respect an action that is good, that is honorable. We find it a lot in morals. And of course, favor is a free one that is not connected to the object, and it is the satisfaction that he is calling the foundation, or in the judgment of the beautiful. Okay, so in the other two, in inclination and respect, which are connected to the pleasant and the good, there is, of course, an interest, which, of course, means that there is a want, a lack, if you like. This is desire determined as a lack, right? If I want to get something, it is because I lack it, because I don't have it. If I want if I want if I want a house in order to live in it, then I have a lack of a house, right? So anytime there's an interest in something, in an object, I want to get that object, so I am missing that object, if you like. There's a lack of an object, so this is why he says all interest presupposes or generates a want, which is not the case, again, for the aesthetical judgment. Okay, I think we are done with the section. We can stop here for today. Next time, which is of course next Tuesday, we can move to the explanation of the beautiful resulting from the first moment, and hopefully next time and the time after it, I think we need 2 more sessions, we'll be able to finish Kant and hopefully do Dickey and see if we have more time to continue, or if we do a review. If we have Danto is a long text as well, so we will figure that out together. Thank you for following. I think I should give you a kind of assignment already. Well, I would say work on only Hume. Work on Hume. I'm going to ask you a question on Hume. You know that we saw different principles in the standard of taste. They are summarized on page 204. I want you to tell me which one is the most important, if you like, the most important principle in the standards, in Hume's standard of taste. Most important principle in Hume's standard of taste. Okay? So once again, homework for next time, which is next Tuesday, please. Which one of his principles is the most important in the standard of taste? You have to explain yourself why. So this is also very personal. You have to reflect on it. Thank you for following, and we continue with Kant next Tuesday. Have a good weekend and stay safe.